Hey, welcome to the Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman. Hey, welcome to the Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman, the show where a cranky middle-aged sports writer who's seen it all, that is me, takes you behind the scenes and into the stories. I am your host, Jeff Pearlman. And even though I've written 11 books, the one that resonates with most people and that has definitely sold the most is my first book, and it was called The Bad Guys Won. It was about the 1986 New York Mets. It has the worst, I just want to say, subtitle of all time, which is, and I don't even remember it, I have to read it, a season of brawling, boozing, bimbo chasing, and championship baseball with Straw Doc, Mookie Nails, the Kid, and the rest of the 1986 Mets, the rowdiest team ever to put on a New York uniform, and maybe the best. Still, the book is sold wonderfully. People love the 86 Mets. Like, people ask me about the 86 Mets all the time. If I go to a Met game and someone hears my name, they actually know me from this book. It's the only thing that happens with, because there's something about 86 and the Mets and New York City that connects. And today, on this not very special episode of the Press Box Chronicles, I want to dive deep into a little segment of 1986. And it's about the absolutely, positively craziest airplane flight that's probably ever happened in sports history. And we're going to dig into it now on the Press Box Chronicles. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the 1986 New York Mets. And if you know baseball and you know baseball history, you know the 86 Mets, they won the World Series, crazy World Series win over the Boston Red Sox. You know the ball going through Bill Buckner's legs, Mookie Wilson. You know the names broadly, Gary Carter and Dwight Gooden, Keith Hernandez, Darryl Strawberry. But this team, it's not just that they were great. It's that they truly, truly, truly exemplified New York City in the gritty, gross, disturbing New York City 1980s way. And I'm a kid of New York. I know New York well. In New York City back in the 80s, when I think of New York City, I actually weirdly think of Times Square, which is the one place no New Yorker ever goes to, unless they have to. And Times Square back in the 80s, like now you know it for the Disneyfication of it. See people dressed up as characters walking around. They have a Bubba Gump shrimp place. They have a Lids. They have all these chain stores. It fucking sucks. But back in the 80s, if you needed some blow in a hooker, you went to Times Square. If you needed to rip some tourists off, you went to Times Square with your fake Rolexes or your cardboard box with your shell game, and you ripped off the kids from Sweden. Like 1986 Times Square was people drinking in public with half of a paper bag covering their Budweiser, people shooting up in an alley. It just was gross. There were peep shows everywhere. It was gross, but it was also like kind of cool New York gritty. And the 86 Mets were that. Like, they really were that. They were gross. They were gritty. Their manager, Davey Johnson, was this cocky, arrogant, cigarette smoking, beer drinking motherfucker who guaranteed fans they were going to win. One of their young players, Lenny Dykstra, one of my favorite scenes from the book, and favorite meaning just gross and exemplifies, is him seeing a bunch of priests in a country club, lifting his leg and farting on them. They were guys who gambled, guys who chewed tobacco. Dwight Gooden at this point was starting to use cocaine. Darryl Strawberry starting to use cocaine. New York City was a cocaine city. The Mets were kind of a cocaine team in a cocaine era. They had pretty boys, right? Like Ron Darling, their pitcher who went to Yale and had a model wife. They were so gripping. And the Mets, the 86 Mets, what was cool about them, it's not like now. First of all, after games, every game, there'd be a keg in the locker room. They would literally bring in a keg, and the players would sit around and smoke cigarettes and drink beers and talk shit about the game and talk about baseball. And their key guy, their captain, was Keith Hernandez, the first baseman. Keith Hernandez, notorious cocaine trial when he was in St. Louis, and he comes to the Mets, and he's this guy who loves sitting around smoking, drinking, talking baseball. And that's what these guys would do. They would sit around the clubhouse after the game. The media would leave. They'd be half dressed and maybe a jersey and their shorts, and they'd just be talking shit about baseball. And afterwards, a ton of them, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15, would go out to local bars. There was this place on Long Island, Finn McCool was a bar on Long Island. And the Mets would go there as a team and drink with fans and get in fights with fans and argue with fans and sleep with fans, married fans, unmarried fans. These were the 86 Mets. They were everything about New York. And during this time period, in what I freaking loved as a kid, is the Mets did something nobody thought was possible, and they overtook the Yankees. The Yankees at this time were the very corporate George Steinbrenner Yankees. They were Don Mattingly, a great player, but very polished. They were Dave Winfield, great player, very polished. They were no facial hair Yankees. They were the corporate Citibank-esque Yankees. And the Mets played in shitty Shea Stadium where you could feel it shake and where the planes flew overhead and where the paint was peeling. I think everything about the Mets was everything you would like if you were gritty, dirty, 6 days without shaving, smoking your 5th cigarette in the hour guy. That was the 86 Mets. And the 86 Mets wind up somehow fulfilling Davey Johnson, their manager's prophecy. Davey Johnson early on guaranteed the media, guaranteed his team, we're going to win this whole fucking thing. And the Mets ran away with the NL East, and they reached the National League Championship Series, and they play the Houston Astros. And they play them in this epic 6-game series. And the Astros are not as good a team as the Mets, but they have this starter for the team named Mike Scott, actually a former Met pitcher, a bad former Met pitcher who goes to the Astros and learns if you scuff a baseball with a little sandpaper and you throw it, it'll do crazy things. And this series goes 6 games. And in the 6th game of the National League Championship Series against the Houston Astros in Houston, the Mets are playing for their life because the Astros, if they win, will start Mike Scott in Game 7. And Mike Scott has already won 2 games in the NLCS. The Mets have no clue how to hit him. They all know they're going to lose if they face him Game 7. So they're busting their asses. And this Game 6 goes 16 innings. It lasts 4 hours and 42 minutes. And the Mets finally win. The game started at 3:05. The Mets enter the clubhouse at 8:20 p.m. They're going to the World Series. And I'm fast forwarding past the details of this game because what matters isn't the game. It's a celebration afterwards. And what happens after winning this game in Houston is the greatest fucking baseball celebration of all time, which we'll get to next. Hey, this is Jeff Pearlman, and as many of you know, I have my 11th book, Only God Can Judge Me, The Many Lives of Tupac Shakur, coming out on October 21st. And the book is available for pre-order everywhere now. I have a special deal. If you pre-order the book and email me at tupacbook1@gmail.com, a screenshot with proof of your order, I will send you, from my very own collection, Tupac stickers, Tupac bookmark, and a signed book plate that you can put in the front. And if you want it made out to someone, to Jim, to Steve, to Bob, to Fred, to whoever, I will happily personalize it. The book comes out October 21st. If you pre-order, which I would usually appreciate, this is how I make a living, and send me proof of your pre-order to tupacbook1@gmail.com. I will hook you up with some really good Tupac stuff. So the Mets beat the Houston Astros. They're not going to have to face Mike Scott. They're going to the World Series. And the Mets are so exhausted. And I interviewed Ray Knight, the third baseman, and he told me after that game, he just felt like a million sandbags were placed on his back. And the different guys, Jesse Orosco, the relief pitcher who pitched in the game, I was exhausted. Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden, everyone who was involved in that game, and even if you sat on the bench, it was mental and physical exhaustion. And normally in society, human beings, if you're mentally and physically exhausted, you take a nap. But these are not the Mets. The Mets are not going to take a nap. And the Mets pile into the clubhouse after the game, the visitors' clubhouse at the Astrodome in Houston. And there are bottles of Great Western bubbly all over the place. And the players are drinking and they're pouring it all over each other. And Randy Neiman, a journeyman relief pitcher, pours a bottle over Frank Cashman, the general manager, who wears a bow tie and has no room in his life for partying. And he gets really pissed off at Randy Neiman. But they just party their asses off for 90 minutes and they're wasted. And then their traveling secretary, Arthur Richmond, this veteran, cranky New York traveling secretary, announces the World Series bus is leaving. Anyone not on the bus gets left behind. Get your asses on the bus. Well, the Met players, already kind of drunk and holding bottles of champagne, get on the bus to go to the airport. Now, there's something interesting that needs to be noted here. The 86 Mets never fly with their wives. It is a rule from Frank Cashman, the general manager, no broads allowed. That was his thing. No broads allowed. And he literally called them broads. And the reason was he didn't want players distracted. If you were fooling around on the road, the last thing you needed was your wife with you. If you wanted to focus on baseball, the last thing you needed was your wife with you. So no wives on the roads. However, two of the Met players, Ron Darling and Ray Knight, met with Cashman before the playoffs and made this impassioned case why they should be allowed to travel. And they were like, basically, look, they cook, they clean, they care for the kids, they care for us. They deserve to enjoy this. And Cashman, very begrudgingly, relents. And he says, fine, we'll let the wives fly, but only on the return flights from Houston. Okay, they're returning from Houston. And the Met players and their wives board the buses and they're drinking. And as they get on the bus, beers are being passed out to the players. So players have their bubbly in one hand. They got their beers. They're not just drinking beers. They're shotgunning beers. They're spraying beer all over the place. It's on this bus. And they get to the airport and they're flying out of Hobby Airport, William P. Hobby Airport in Houston. And the Mets during the season chartered with Ozark Airlines, which is a private company that chartered, and they chartered on a DC-9. And I interviewed people for my book from Ozark Airlines about chartering the Mets. And to a man, they hated it. They said the Mets sucked because they were always throwing things on the plane. They were always talking shit on the plane. They were breaking things on the plane. Said it was like chartering animals. There was one particular flight, June 29th, from Chicago to St. Louis, where the players started throwing dinner rolls at the flight attendants. And Ozark was like, you do this one more time, you're done. Anyway, for the playoffs, because you had the wives now flying, they had to charter a bigger flight. So they actually went with United, and they got a DC-10. And they get to Hobby Airport. And the players are boarding the plane. So now they've had their Great Western Bubbly. They've had their beer. And they're getting on the plane holding Great Western Bubbly and beer. And as they board the plane, United's flight attendants have glasses of champagne for them. So a lot of these players have the bubbly, have the beer, and now they're getting a glass of champagne. And none of them are saying no. So all these people are getting wasted. And they board the plane. And the Mets in flight were a really interesting group. So basically, you would have up front the coaching staff. And Davey Johnson, the manager, was a drinker. And he would drink a lot while the team was flying. He wasn't getting wasted with the players, but he'd be drinking up front, drinking his beer. Behind the coaches, you'd have the kind of soft guys with the Mets. So Gary Carter, the great catcher and a really important member of the team, didn't drink at all. And he and his wife, Sandy, were sitting there. And Gary Carter's kind of a fascinating figure on this team. He did not fit in at all, except that he was a phenomenal baseball player. His nickname was Teeth and Camera Carter because teammates made fun of him because he always wanted the spotlight. He always wanted to be the glare. He once did an advertisement for chewing gum and insisted he would only do it if he was allowed to chew sugar-free gum. He was that guy. Very puritanical, very religious, great guy, but just that guy. Mookie Wilson, another guy, not a drinker, kind of a teetotaler, hung out more with Gary Carter than with the other players. Sat up front. Ray Knight, not a drinker. But once you got past that, you had a bunch of guys on this team who loved drinking, loved their Coke, loved partying, and loved being on a plane. And one story that I remember, Ed Hearn, a backup catcher who was not a big drinker, told me was one time in transit, he's sitting in his seat. This is when they were just traveling during the regular season, and he feels water coming down on his seat. And he turns around, and it's Rafael Santana, their drunk shortstop, peeing all over his back. Those are the 86 Mets. So now they're on this flight. It's about a 3.5 to 4 hour flight from Houston back to New York. And the players immediately are just getting wasted, absolutely wasted. They're drinking and they're drinking. And you have these three guys on the Mets. It's important to know them, the scum bunch. And there are two relief pitchers, Jesse Orosco, a veteran lefty reliever, and Doug Sisk. And then you had a pinch hitter outfielder named Danny Heap. And the scum bunch, as they were known, sat in the back of the plane. And they were largely responsible for getting wasted and throwing things at people. So on this flight, they serve dinner and they start chucking it. Dinner rolls, chuck. Chicken, chuck. Vegetables, chuck. Meanwhile, you have guys who I won't name in the bathroom snorting coke. At one point, Dwight Gooden recalled the door flying open and some guy literally with a straw on the bathroom sink snorting his cocaine. You have guys like Darryl Strawberry, guys like Gooden, I don't know, different players on the team tearing down the seats, literally taking the seats and pushing them so they go all the way back so they can lie down on the seats, so their wives can lie down on the seats, so they can fool around with their wives. Late into the flight, wives who are not used to drinking this hard, largely, and flying at the same time, start vomiting all over the place. So you have all these wives of the Mets vomiting. And Ron Darling, one of my favorite Mets of all time, and a great guy and a great announcer, recalled for me in very vivid detail in the book, wives throwing up all over their patent leather outfits. And this flight goes on, and it goes on, and it is rowdy, and it is violent, and it is awesome. It's basically all the pressure of a 162 game season, now plus the playoffs, coming out, and you just unleashing and unloading and feeling it. And even Davey Johnson, the manager, who has recently passed, by the way, rest in peace, Davey Johnson, he knew what this was. This was a release. And when the Mets land in New York, there are fans waiting to greet the team. And the door opens and they show up at Kennedy Airport. And the players come up and their wives are covered in vomit. And the players look like they've been stabbed by death 25 times over. And the fans are like, oh, hey, what the fuck is this? And the Mets are waving, but they just want to get home. And they're exhausted and they're filled with euphoria. And the Mets as an organization does not take this very well. So throughout the history of sports aviation, there have been other teams that have ruined planes, or at least beat up planes. There are stories of Billy Martin with the Yankees and, I don't know, the Sparky Lyle and Rich Gosses in different fights. And in the USFL book I wrote, there are these guys and a Birmingham Stallions almost beat the shit out of each other on a plane. Like, there are stories of athletes and planes and quasi-destruction. But there's nothing like this. And in the days after the Mets arrive in New York, after returning from Houston, United Airlines sends a bill to the Mets for $7,500 worth of damage, which at the time was a lot of money. And Frank Cashin, the general manager of the Mets, receives this bill. And he gives it to Davey Johnson, the manager of the Mets. And he says, you need to tell your players that we are dividing this bill up among them, and they will be paying for the damages. This is a shameful, shameful day for the New York Mets. Davey, I expected more out of you. I expected more out of your players. They're professionals. We play them well. What kind of message are we sending? This is really disturbing. Tell your players that they're going to be paying for this, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Well, Davey Johnson takes a letter from Frank Cashin, and he has a team meeting. This is before the World Series. And this is in Shea Stadium, in the clubhouse at Shea Stadium. And he says, guys, we got to talk. We got to talk. And he holds the bill up. And he says, this is an outrage. We have this letter from United Airlines. We have caused $7,500 worth of damage to this airplane. And I know which one of you guys are guilty. I know who did this. This is a really dark day for the New York Mets. And I'm really horrified to even have to stand in front of you and hold this meeting and make this announcement. And then he takes the bill in front of the team and he goes like this. And I'll tell you something else. Fuck Frank Cashin. Fuck the New York Mets. Fuck this bullshit. We're about to win the World Series and we're about to make them a lot more than fucking $7,500. You guys aren't paying a cent. This is bullshit. Just win the fucking World Series. And the room goes crazy. The room goes crazy. And the Mets obviously go on to this epic World Series win over the Boston Red Sox. And I was actually recently asked by someone, what made those Mets so special? How are they able to keep coming up with win after win after win? The miracle Astro win in Game 6, the Buckner win Game 6 in the World Series. How are they able to do this? And honest to God, I think one of the most underrated things in sports is a spirit of cohesiveness and togetherness and going out together and drinking together and partying together and fighting together. The Mets that season had 4 on-field fights against other teams. They never lost, and they beat the shit out of opposing players. They just did together as a team, collectively. And Davey Johnson standing up there and ripping up the bill and saying, fuck that bullshit. We're the New York Mets. We're going to win the World Series was maybe the most galvanizing call. And that to me is in many ways the beauty of this crazy ass flight from Houston to New York is that it bonded this team over beers, over women, over drunkenness, over druggedness, and over winning the World Series and saying, fuck you to your own team that wanted to charge you $7,500 after winning one of the great games in baseball history. And that, among many other reasons, is why of all the teams I talk about on the show, of all the teams I will talk about in the show, there's no team I love more than the 1986 world champion New York Mets. That is a wrap for this episode of Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman. Please leave a comment below on what stories you'd like to hear more about, or if there's a figure who interests you. A note, my new book, Only God Can Judge Me, The Many Lives of Tupac Shakur, is available now wherever you buy books. Please make sure you like and subscribe to the show. Follow me on TikTok at Jeff Pearlman Author, Bluesky at Jeff Pearlman. Thank you for diving behind the scenes and digging into the story. We'll see you next time on Press Box Chronicles.